Hello and welcome to another exciting episode on our Sustainability, ESG and Space series. My name is Nishan,
And I'm Miki Sode.
and we're delighted to embark on another interesting episode. This episode, we've got a interesting user of space data. It's a company called Delos who uses space data to develop insurance products, and that creates a really interesting opportunity for us. What does the end user look like, and what is the ability of the end user to shape sustainability topics in space? And so with that, we're delighted to invite the CEO of Delos, Kevin Stein, to our podcast. Kevin, welcome.
Thank you, Nishan. Very happy to be here.
Excellent. So maybe let's just start by, if you could just introduce Delos, what does Delos do? And also maybe a little bit of your journey and how you came to value space data in the insurance products that you've been developing.
Sure, absolutely. It's been an interesting and winding experience. So I am an aerospace engineer. I did my master's at Stanford in aeronautics and astronautics. Did my career in satellite spacecraft design. I was a mechanical systems engineer by trade, but worked in more on the manufacturing side, more on the design side, and on the sales side for a while. From the large companies to the small startups, CubeSat companies. Actually worked in the lab at Stanford that co-invented the CubeSat. So have a lot of experience in many different aspects. As everybody knows, is listening to this podcast, every aerospace engineer dreams of selling insurance. So I'm happy to report that I made it and everybody else is getting left behind. So they should get on their horse and get here. No, myself and my co-founder, we come from the aerospace world. The reason why we ended up in the insurance industry is that we were looking across all use cases of space-based data. And we were trying to find something that fit the sort of Venn diagram of a very large industry, an industry that doesn't utilize space-based data, but could significantly benefit economically from space-based data, and something that we were passionate about. In the end, where we ended up was focusing on climate change. What we really cared about was trying to prepare a world when we started this company in 2016, 17, prepare a world for understanding the effects of climate change and helping consumers understand how to live within that world. And therefore, we looked at catastrophes. Being in California native, so as my co-founder, our focus was wildfires. This is before the big wind-driven fires that we saw in 2017 with the Tubbs Fire and Thomas Fire that I think everybody remembers that lives here. This is before those started. We simply had a view that climate change is going to get worse and it was going to drive significantly more extreme wildfire activity. And we believe that people would not necessarily realize that this is going to affect society in a variety of different ways. We then looked at how can we operationalize this data, and we found that the insurance industry was really the perfect fit. First of all, it has the level of revenue that allows you to continuously turn the flywheel of innovation as it relates to wildfire modeling, understanding the risk as it moves forward, but also it has connection points. It's connected to, if you do it right, hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of property owners, be them homeowners or commercial property owners, and you already understand their risk. So you can communicate to these folks what their risk is, educate them about their own risk, and help them understand how to harden themselves, protect themselves, and live within this world where they may be threatened by wildfire activity. So we embarked on that journey, and it took a while to understand the industry and really hone our products to be the right fit for the market that we're serving. But years into it at this point, we have accomplished that and the company is off and running.
Excellent. So you're an end user of space data. How do you think about that? Do you rely on a single source? Do you rely on multiple sources? And part of what we're doing as part of this podcast is to also understand some of the risks of lack of coordination in space and some of the risks there. So how do you think about some of the risks and reliance on space data as well, if there was a lack of coordination among them?
Yeah, it's a great question. Our sort of reason for creating the company was a way to operationalize space-based data. But of course, the company itself is selling a product that is a last mile solution for a ground-based industry, right? And so we have to create not just the best product that we can, not just the most efficient financially product that we can, but also make sure that we're managing the risks associated with availability of that data. And of course, my board tasks me and my co-founder with understanding the risk of every single aspect of the company, be it our data streams or our partners or our individuals, and making sure that we are resilient and robust to any one of those disappearing for whatever reason it may be. When it comes to the modeling product that we have to look at alternative backup data streams, if you will, which has a really interesting effect of decision making on which data to choose from. Of course, when you're making a product that simply is best product for the customer, of course, product market fit, that's what you have to create a successful company. When you're looking at that, you can't be tied to any one source of data, really anything, right? You have to really just make sure you're scouring the industry and the market for the best available, and then in the best fit and going from there. But of course, that in addition to needing to be robust to any data stream disappearing, we make sure that we have backups. What that does is that puts space-based data in direct competition with ground-based data, of course. And therefore, we need to make sure that we're assessing what is going to be the best solution or fit for us. One of the sort of philosophies that I have coming from the space industry was really that there needs to be more last mile solutions created for ground-based industries. And I strongly feel in those ground-based solutions for more free market industries, as opposed to relying a little bit too much potentially on government funding or grant funding or anything like that. And therefore, I think it's very healthy to have a situation where you have always space-based data in competition with ground-based data. And that pushes the data coming from space-based assets to need to constantly evolve and innovate to make sure that they can be and will be the best solution for any given last mile solution out there.
Interesting. You and I met at a space conference long time ago. I think it was probably the beginning of Delos too. And I
2015, 2016.
So I bring up conference because if you go to, say, Space Symposium or any of those big space conferences, right? We don't see end users like you or anybody else who might use space-based data or space-enabled products and knowledge, right? But I'm sure you go to, say, insurance company conferences, right? And people in your sector or the business, but not space people, right?
Yes,
so I think what I'm trying to get at it is that what do you wish, say, space sector to know from your perspective, and maybe vice versa, that might help bridge the gap and have a more, I guess, not siloed, but like more communication between the two sectors.
Yeah, more integrated. Yeah, Miki, it's funny. When we met, my co-founder and I were actually working on a separate business plan. We're working on a space hardware company. And we decided to shut down that company ourselves. We had some amazing innovative technology with one of my previous professors from Stanford that allowed us to take some intersatellite communication hardware and really reduce the size because of innovative power that we were able to bring to it. It doesn't really matter. The reality is we set up the company and realized that we were selling two other space-based assets. There simply was not enough things in space to ever justify the creation of that company. The revenue wasn't there. And for the listeners, it's a little bit more information about what it is Delos does. Delos is an insurance provider in California. We take satellite imagery and other data and turn that into future predictive wildfire risk models. Not surprisingly, one of the biggest risks to home insurance and homes in California is wildfires. Wildfire as a peril is covered under home insurance. We found throughout our experience getting into the industry that creating a model and selling it to carriers was really not ever going to solve for the coverage gap problems, the fact that insurance was not able to understand future predictive risk, was not able to understand wildfire exposure. And therefore, we built an insurance provider around the wildfire models that we created. And now today we insure, I think, $85 million worth of premium across California. That's 30,000 homes or so. We are actually the leading specialty home insurance provider in California at this time. And we are in the process of onboarding significantly larger amounts of backing to be able to push the amount of insurance that we can write in California up to about 400 million from the 85 that we're at right now, which would put us in close to the top 10 insurance companies in California. So we've been able to really operationalize these wildfire models in a way that is very effective. It's a great fit for the problem. The products are a great fit for the market. And that was one of the things we realized when we shut down the space hardware company. We realized the space industry is full of brilliant technologists that come up with brilliant technology, and it's not full of tons of revenue. And this is a while ago at that time, but of course, being an aerospace engineer, I keep tabs on my industry. What I came to understand when I shut down the space hardware company and started to look for other things that I could do in the space industry was that the space industry is full of brilliant technologists with brilliant technology, but there's a very large untapped opportunity. And that's to be able to take space data, and implement that data, the use of that data, the ingestion of that data into very large ground-based industries, specifically focused on the ones that, as I mentioned before, was not currently utilizing space-based data and could significantly benefit from that data. I think, Miki, to your point, there is a lot of space-focused folks that are absolute dreamers, brilliant people. That's why I love the space industry, that frequent these types of events. And then you go to insurance as an example, and many others. I'm certain that on the ground, probably shipping, warehousing, agriculture, countless number of other older industries. And there's not a bunch of aerospace engineers walking around, right? So what I think would enable the space industry to generate significantly larger amounts of revenue and diversified revenue in order to create a more economically sustainable, diverse set of solutions is to be able to create more last mile solutions where you're purely focused on translating, taking the space data and using that to create a solution for the end user in these industries. The end user then doesn't have to know how to use the data. And frankly, it doesn't even have to know that the data comes from space, right? If you think of GPS as a convenient example, and obviously it's everybody's example in the space industry, but there's many more. If you use GPS as an example, when you get in your car and tap on your phone to route you to a certain place, very few people, especially people outside the industry, space industry, are thinking, oh, this is going to space. I'm getting information from space here. They're not thinking that. They're just driving to their destination. For us, when people are buying our home insurance policy, part of our brand is home insurance powered by science, but probably these folks are buying this home insurance policy worried about getting home insurance, not thinking about how we use space-based data to be able to more accurately assess the risk of their home and therefore more accurately price their home, their insurance, and therefore try to get them a more affordable policy. More solutions like that for shipping and trucking and agriculture and sciences and logistics, supply chain, hedge funds, financial industries. There's so many industries out there that generate massive amounts of money, and value can be added to them in a way that is just the best solution out there. Therefore, sustains through any changes in budgeting in the government, as an example, or can be used across all countries in the world. It's just a solution that's needed by Earth.
That's fascinating because as somebody resident in California, you can't get fire insurance, even though we're surrounded by all. I can see that. What you're effectively saying is that there are industries and there are niches within industries that space data or industries that rely on that space supply chain can actually identify it and create new value, because land-based insurance cannot cover the scale of this type of wildfire insurance in California. But you found a niche, you managed to find premiums of $80 million so far that you made. So that's value creation. And so you're saying that there's all this untapped potential. And see, we get to this chicken and egg situation. That how do we unleash the private and sustainable space economy? Do we rely on space scientists, engineers, those in government or the military to say, look, here's a supply, here's a new sensor, here's a new technology, hardware, software that we can release out there? Or is it the other way around? Do we need more demand signals? And maybe the insurers are the wrong one, or maybe it's that third way where you need this business model innovation, right? To find a way of matchmaking demand signals and create this sandbox to play around and identify new kind of business niches. How do you think about that? Where are we on that innovation curve? And how do you think about unleashing a real potential? You think that latent potential that hasn't been unlocked yet?
It's a great way of putting it, especially looking at demand. Like everybody else in the space industry, I dream of a space industry that is full of many different activities, revenue streams, right? I believe that we should be putting infrastructure on the moon, putting infrastructure on Mars. I can't wait till we have space stations and people living up in different places. And there's a lot of folks that are working on technologies like that, right? Working on lunar mining, asteroid capture, space stations, a lot of different aspects that I would love for that to exist. But if we're really honest about the current state of the industry, we're not at a place where if you stick an asteroid miner into space, immediately we can turn around and generate a full industry around it, a full economy around it. I think a lot of people focus on looking at the knee in the curve for the industry and saying, what's the technology we need to hit that knee in the curve, to create that need? And I don't think that's the right way to think about it. It's a feedback loop. If we agree that we're on more of the flatter part of the curve before the knee, then really the question is, how do we progress ourselves along that curve to get to the knee? And in my opinion, it's bringing in a lot more revenue. If we're able to create more last mile solutions for different industries, diversify revenue streams, increase revenue, then the industry is going to have a lot more money coming in. And that's going to justify more investment on newer technology to enable more of that revenue. And that will feed back to the ground-based industries where we're bringing in more revenue, more solutions, more value, a broader customer base, and that'll justify more investment. And it will go back and forth and get to a point where there's just more capital in space, there's more revenue in space, there's more clear business plans. You can go to investors and say, here is the market that I expect. And that can be based on where the market is now, instead of what a lot of business plans are saying, here's the market that I expect based on these handful of things that most likely will possibly, hopefully be able to get the industry from where it is now to the industry where this technology is extremely useful. And being able to make the economy, the space-based economy, more robust allows us to really achieve the future that we all dream of.
So this is really interesting because effectively there's some schools of thought, this podcast we've interviewed, which says we do need to think about better coordination, better intervention, effectively, I wouldn't say better regulation, but there may be norms and behaviors in the space industry, but you've got a different perspective. Effectively, you're saying there's a race to get as much revenue in to the space industry. And actually there's a new category of stakeholders, which are the end users, companies like yourself and others, and they will need a seat at the table because they may be able to influence the space industry in a much more powerful way in terms of demanding ethical data source or better open source data or APIs or whatever the parameters may be. But they need a seat at the table. Do you find right now that there are avenues for end users to have that seat at the table, or is that something that the space industry needs to be thinking a lot more smartly about in order to then overcome that 22, that chicken and egg, to get more demand for their services as well?
I think there are other groups out there that are trying to create that feedback loop, right? You have Skylo and Spire and Planet and a lot of the other groups that have tried to take this data and make it easily ingestible. And there's plenty of others. Don't get me wrong. Orbital Insights had some really interesting financial services products, right? They're trying to create these last mile solutions, and they are in a lot of ways the bridge, the feedback loop to making sure that we have that conversation and a representative of these industries within the space industry. I think for now, what we really need to grow and build are those last mile solutions, is the product market fit, right? You need to have more revenue generating lines of business to be able to create the robust nature of the economy, and then absolutely have the rest of those conversations. And these folks will have a seat at the table because pure supply and demand, product market fit will drive the need, and the discussions of what that data looks like, what the industry looks like, really would need to be formed around what supports, enables, and can work within the constructs of these industries that they serve.
These industries, and yeah, they bring about kind of other players as well, because there's the end user, but there's also individuals like insurers of the space industry as well, who are adjacent to what they call space operators and launchers and those who demand data, but those who actually play a different role in that space industry just to shape behavior. Is that something that you see as being an important stakeholder in terms of shaping behavior in the space industry?
Yeah, if I can represent my insurance industry here just for a second, a sign of a healthy, robust industry is insurance that is available, affordable, and will drive behavior and risk management. Maybe just a quick sales pitch on the insurance industry for those of you out there that just got put to sleep when I started talking about it. Think about what insurance enables, right? The reality is any innovation that's happened in the insurance and the aerospace industry has been enabled by insurance, because no one group has the ability to take an entire spacecraft that is lost during launch or a rocket that is lost during launch and take the financial impact of that on their own balance sheet. They simply don't have enough money to withstand that. So you have to have insurance be able to mitigate the effect of that loss. And once you have that financial mechanism to be able to repair in some ways your loss, then you can start to take more risks. If you didn't have that, you wouldn't take any risks, and you would never be able to innovate. You'd never be able to do something different and new that could potentially be better than the last launch that you had, so the last satellite that you made. The insurance industry, the insurance products for space enable that innovation. Anyway, to back off of the sales pitch on the insurance industry, what the presence of that financial mechanism, insurance, what that enables or forces everybody to do is look at risk management to determine how they're looking at the development of their manufacturing, their design, what they're putting into space. And there's a financial control because the pricing of insurance will change based on the risk that you're putting into your spacecraft. It pushes everybody financially to a safer, more robust, doing business the right way, designing the right way types of spacecraft. And so just purely by that financial incentive, we'll have a seat at the table. And there's the liability insurance as well. Well, as it relates to making sure that there is the availability of data and the ethical sourcing of data done in a way that is, again, the right way to do business, there will be a financial incentive of the liability insurance on different groups that are partaking in space-based activities. And so absolutely, they'll have a seat at the table, and it's healthy to have that sort of driving the behavior in any industry. Of course, you need folks that understand the aerospace industry in order to have those incentives be moving in the right direction. If you have folks that don't understand space, creating an insurance policy or pricing for a space activity, then then the incentives aren't working in the right direction, which makes it even more critical that the space industry and surrounding adjacent industries associated with the space industry has folks that are highly knowledgeable about the space industry.
Okay, so I have last question, and this may sound like kind of meta question, but who else should we talk to? Because like you obviously went through a lot of thinking and research and assessment and analysis coming from aerospace, and you love the area and built satellite and all of that, right? But then you had a lot of thinking and holistic perspective of the industry and economics too, right? And then ended up settling into insurance sector. But like through your journey and through your perspective, what end user or people that space people don't usually talk to that we should hear voices from?
Yeah, it's a great question. A lot of the companies that I mentioned earlier, I think are very important voices to have in the dialogue for looking at how we want to approach building out and growing the space industry. Really anybody that's created the last mile solution, because those folks look at things from a very different lens. And what those folks have had to do is they've had to go into these other industries and look at what can be a significant revenue driver. What is a product market fit for a solution in an industry that knows nothing about space? And the more that we learn from those folks in many different types of industries, the more informed the space industry will be as they start to look at the growth and the future of the industry.
Excellent. Kevin, this has been a fascinating podcast. I feel that there's so much more that we were just on the cusp of exploring. I'd love to explore more about, how do we think about ethical data sources, ethical models, interrogation. There's a whole realm to look at. But I think what you've given us in this podcast is an understanding that there are these important stakeholders who are the end users. They are going to be what stimulates demand and stimulates a robust space economy. There'll be uses for space primarily, certainly in your industry, around data to begin with. We're just at the cusp of unleashing that data revolution, which could unlock new value sources like insurance products, shipping, logistics, other sectors. And there needs to be a lot more business model innovation, unlocking those last mile solutions. That's not something that's going to come from government. It's not something that's going to come from large companies, but there has to be mechanisms to unlock those last mile solutions. And if we can do that, creates a new and powerful voice to shape how the space industry will evolve. And hopefully we can use space for sustainable uses on Earth, because it may be more cost effective and lower footprint to monitor things from space. So with that, that's all we have time for today's podcast. I do hope you'll join us again on the future podcasts. And thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun.